Hey, good afternoon, Nick. How are you?
Doing lovely. Thank you for having me, Jason.
Oh, I'm so excited. We've been talking about this for, mm, I think almost a year now. Maybe not quite a year, but quite a while. We've known each other for, I was looking at the calendar. We've known each other for a year and a half or somewhere in there.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
we've been talking about having you on the show, and I'm so glad we finally made it happen. So for the audience listening, it is Tuesday, February 9th, 2021. And Nick, I know we have a lot to talk about, and we have about an hour and 20 minutes. So let's get right into it, my friend. So, love if you'd introduce yourself to the audience, who you are, where in the world you are, where in the world you may be soon. Hint,
Yeah.
hint. And anything else you'd like to share with us before we kick off.
For sure. For sure. Thank you so much, Jason, for having me. My name is Nick Larson, CRO and co-founder of Willow, Bay Area native, always pretty fascinated with technology and people. And let's see, I teach surfing, like to play a little music, like to be a bridge between good people, doing neat stuff.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, super jazzed to be on here with you and learn and share.
Awesome. I'm gonna give you a pass on your humble pass through introduction. We'll dig in on that later because you had a couple of acronyms in there, at least one that I didn't go in on you on, but I know we're going to get into all this. So we'll give
Yeah.
the audience, I'll give you a pass here in the first minute or so.
Okay, I'm sure you'll roast me at some point.
Yeah, I mean, that's a given. There's definitely some roasting happening. All
Okay.
right. So, let's go ahead and kick it off today, Nick. So first question for you is, what is something that you nerd out about? And I know that you nerd out about a lot of stuff just like I do. So I'm really excited to
Mm,
see what you have to share with us. I know you're like me, you have a lot of really interesting and cool hobbies,
we're
including music,
Renaissance
which we
men.
share. I do not surf. I'm from Minnesota. We don't surf in Minnesota. That is not does not happen in Minnesota.
It's chilly. Plus, you got to worry about those pikes. They'll take off the cone. Right?
Northern pikes. Yeah, the northern pikes, they're scary. And well, you're also missing one other key thing about Minnesota. We're about 2,000 miles away from the nearest ocean waves on any way, shape, or
Yeah.
form.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess you could hypothetically surf in Lake Superior if you go near the North Shore when it's really windy,
Yeah.
but it's not it's not something you can count on. So yeah, Nick, what's something that you nerd out about?
Yeah. I really like old books. So similar to yourself, I would consider myself a Renaissance man.
Yeah.
So art and music and self-discovery and growth and all that good stuff. Um, but I started collecting older books, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 12 years ago. So every now and then I'll go to an old bookstore and see what first editions they have and sometimes splurge. I've also gotten some pretty neat ones as gifts. I have a first edition Huckleberry Finn.
Really?
Yeah. So
That's what, 1880 or something like that?
Yeah, it's original Sam Clemens.
Wow.
Right.
That's cool.
So
I
and then
love that
also
book too.
pretty fascinated by the mind, which I know encompasses so many pretty wild things. Just as we're understanding data, but specifically, you know what? A good introduction on Netflix. There's a 5-part series where each piece is 20 minutes long, so very like outsized content. Yeah, it's called Understanding the Mind. It's awesome. There's one on memory. There's one on psychedelics. There's one on mindfulness, dreams, and anxiety.
That
So
sounds fascinating.
yeah, Netflix really crushed it with that.
Yeah, that's cool. So the books, what got you into the book thing? Are you a big reader?
It comes in waves, like
Me too.
yeah. So I really do like to read because you can get into that flow state, especially when you're on the same on the same page of is the author. So because I'm in the technology and software world, having a book in your hand, especially something that's been around for a long time, and so many people have held and read, there's like something pretty magical about like that tactile feeling. I'm not sure else how to describe it other than it's just like so different from software.
Yeah, you're bringing up something for me. We ordered. I know you don't have children yet, but we have. I've shared. We have a 5-year-old, just
Yeah.
turned 5, and this actually reminds me of something that's super cool. My wife ordered a bunch of books. I don't remember if it was eBay or some other site, but they were children's books that were like 25 to 30 years old, and they had these really cool signatures in the front of them from like grandparents or parents, it's kind of, I felt a little sad about it, but at the same time, and who knows who these people were, but at the same time, it's super cool to be like, hey, at some point, another 5-year-old read this book with their mom and dad, and now we get to read it. And that person is an adult now. And obviously it's not the same as a Huckleberry Finn first edition, but it's really cool to think about the power of passing those things down.
Yeah. I mean, that's our history. We're creating history and relationships, and the book in that case is just like a vehicle, right?
Yeah. Very cool. All right. I'm excited for this question for you because I really want to see what you got for us. So what's something that you are comfortable doing, or that's, in other words, inside your comfort zone, which, that's a mental thing, right? That's something in our mind that we say, hey, this is something I like doing, or that I'm comfortable doing. What's something that is inside of your comfort zone, Nick, that might be outside of somebody else's?
At first I was going to say public speaking, but I feel like
number one answer on this show.
Yeah. So I'm not going to do that. I would say big, scary surf. And it wasn't always that way. Like I started surfing when I was 12, and had a few close calls. I got swept out to sea, like a mile out to sea, surfing underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, like a
mile.
Yeah, I got picked up by the Coast Guard. That was like pretty terrifying, but
that sounds pretty scary.
But like repeated interaction with something that would be terrifying for somebody without that experience, it gives you an extra level of confidence. It's like being out there in the water, especially Santa Cruz, just as like cold and sharky.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of energy rolling around and water moving around. But being in that zone, especially if you catch like a good wave or two, or you're out there with your buddies and you see them catching waves, it becomes playful. So something that is like dangerous potentially, like 10 to 12 foot, bigger waves, it can actually be pretty exhilarating and gives you extra sense of confidence of being able to rise to that level, I guess.
Yeah. I know nothing about surfing other than I took one lesson in Hawaii, and it was really fun. I think if I had more of an opportunity to do it, I would love it. But you said big, scary waves is like, what is a big, scary wave? Because to me, they all look a little scary because I don't know what I'm doing. Like for you, where you're like, hey, that's easy, and to like, oh, that's a challenge. Is it a height thing? Is it a power thing? How do you know?
Good question. It's a combination. So first and foremost, standing offer, if you ever want to come surfing with me, Jason, I got extra boards and suits.
Yes.
So there's 3 different kinds of waves. There's beach breaks, there's reef breaks, and point breaks.
I've seen the movie.
Yeah.
Not the remake. I think they made a remake.
If you look at the biggest, meanest waves, it's typically, you get like Puerto Escondido down in like what they call the Mexican pipeline, and that's like a huge sandbar essentially. And then you get reef breaks, which can be razor sharp, and you get like half of the ocean that's dumping on like 2 feet, 3 feet of water. Like
that's crazy.
Or like Mavericks, it's just like deep, kind of where it goes really deep to really shallow.
Yeah.
And then all that energy folds on top of itself. And that's when you get like a tubular kind of a wave, which I know
so cool.
That term is cheesy these days, but
yeah, that makes sense. So can you just look at something and know whether you're scared or not?
Yeah. Like if, like depending on where the swell is coming from, if the water is kind of pushing back towards the rocks, or like what happened to me under the Golden Gate, it's an outgoing tide. It's like a 5-knot current. So, I was paddling as hard as I could. Yeah. So, it just really has to do with like, the size and the power, like you mentioned, and then also, anything that you might hit, other people included.
Yeah. I sail, so I understand the concept of reading the waves and feeling the wind.
Yes.
But sailing can be very dangerous as well. But to me, it seems like quite a difference because I can take down my sail and be like, okay, I'm taking down my sail. We're hunkering down and we're not really going to be in the impact of the full wind. you can't really be like, I think I'm going to skip this wave. Like you have to kind of take the wave when it comes, don't you? Or can you like go over the top of it and like wait for the next one? I bodyboard, like I like bodyboarding. I'll do that at Rockaway Beach in Queens.
Yeah.
Can you choose the wave you want to ride, or is it kind of like I'm out here and now I got to take this thing when it comes in?
Yeah. You can, if you can go underneath the wave, think like an ice cream scoop, the majority of the power is on top, right? So if you can duck dive,
yep,
then you can escape that. In fact, Kelly Slater mentioned something about that a while ago on an interview, because it's weird, right? You see like these huge monster moving mountains of water coming towards you, and like your first inclination is like, I want to paddle away from this, not towards it. That's right. The goal, to try and get underneath of it. Hopefully if you're doing like really like waves of consequence, then you've got folks on jet skis and you've got like a PFD that you can pull the ripcord and What about you? What would you say is something that's inside of your comfort zone that is outside of most folks?
Talking to anybody about anything.
You are good at that.
Yeah. I have almost no fear to go up and strike a conversation with almost anybody and find common ground. It doesn't mean it always happens. And I'm a very extroverted person, Nick, as you know. So I think for certain personality styles, they probably don't like me because of that, but it doesn't bother me at all to walk. I can walk in a room and know nobody and strike up a conversation in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm not the least bit scared. I'm just like, oh yeah. I didn't always used to be about that, be like that, but
Do you think that comes from your experience in improv, or is that more just because you have like this very generous, loving attitude towards people?
Yeah, I think it comes from, I just genuinely like most people. I'm one of those people who actually sees the good in most people, not all, but most people, I genuinely see them as good people. And also, and this has been call it a breakthrough for me. It's like a coaching term in the last couple of years. It's like, not everybody's got to be like me for me to like them. And like, I find it really interesting to go and find common ground with somebody that maybe at first glance I wouldn't find common ground with. So that's what drives me. And I'm unafraid. And the other thing is at my ripe old age now, I'm just like, I don't care in a good way. And like, there's no stakes here.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm unattached to, and coming from the sales world, which, you still work in, and I, in a way still do. I do a lot of coaching and for salespeople and such. And, like I'm run my own business. So there's always sales there. Selling myself, I'm just kind of unattached to how it has to go. And it didn't used to be like this. It used to have to be like every impression had to be perfect so that we could make the sale and customers would like you. And then they'd buy a lot and you exceed your quota and And I just don't care as much anymore, which actually has me showing up more authentically, which is a lot more fun. And I find people fun. I find them fascinating, which is kind of the genesis of this show. Like, let me go talk to amazing people. Some of the people I know really well, some of the people I know fairly well, and some of the people I've never met before, but on every single conversation, I have a good time. So for those, for my avid listeners out there, and there are some avid listeners because I see your stats. So thank you for listening for the last,
60 episodes, I think.
Yeah. Like by the time we release this will be like episode 64 or something.
Crushing it. It's that consistency, Jason, that is so impressive to me.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoy doing it. And I just know no matter who I have on the show, it's going to be a good time. And I'm going to ask you the same questions, but we're going to go off on all sorts of fun tangents. So so that's the first thing that comes to mind for me. And now for you, let's look at the opposite. So what's something that is outside of your comfort zone that might be inside of somebody else's, Nick?
Yeah. This is a little bit embarrassing to admit just because of the just because we place a really high priority on like engineering and like mechanical proficiency or adeptness. But if I took apart a motor, I wouldn't have the first idea of how to put it back together. And then if I tried, there would be all sorts of screws and stuff. It's like, wait a second. So I can barely handle IKEA furniture. It's a little bit embarrassing because I wish I was stronger in that regard.
Yeah.
But that's just how the good Lord made me.
I think you're all right, man. If you can hit those barrels and sweep out to sea and stay alive. I think the good news is there's a thing called TaskRabbit. You can pay them $100 to build your IKEA furniture.
Perfect.
I'm pretty good at carpentry and IKEA furniture. Like I've built some furniture. What I know nothing about is engines. Like if you said to me, "Hey, fix this car," I'd be like, "I have no clue." I really stay away from plumbing, electrical work, or any sort of engine, because those are the things that can kill me.
Safety first.
Woodworking, I can build like I built a bench, I built like an outdoor dining table. I can do that because it's not going to kill me, but anything that can like shock me, burn me, or explode, I'm paying the experts. That's what they're trained to do.
I'm not surprised that you're a woodworker. You seem like a guy that would be, oh yeah, by the way, I made this dining room table. Like I can totally see that.
I did. All right, Nick. So we are gonna come back to public speaking because you mentioned this. And so I'm gonna give you my almighty platform outside of this podcast. And I have this secret thing where I can give anybody I want to power to speak to the world. I don't know if you knew this, but you're learning something about me today. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I give you 5 minutes. So this is your 5-minute TED Talk. Yeah. What would you give your speech on, and what would be your call to action for us at the end of the speech?
The entire world.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd share the history of bubblegum. No, I don't know. Maybe probably play a song on the guitar for like 2 minutes. You know, something. Like I'm a big fan of the Beatles. Like, you know, that song "In My Life." You know, there are places I remember.
Oh, of course.
I think playing that to everybody would probably soothe the entire world. Even
I think so. I think so. It is one of the greatest feel-good songs of all time.
Yeah.
Like it's not that uplifting, but it's just so peaceful. I mean, it's an uplifting song, but it's not like a all major key, like a super exciting song. It's just very.
Yeah, it's not like Whitney Houston, get you pumped up. Like
that's right.
Yeah. So that, and then I don't know, maybe a couple jokes. It'd be it'd be interesting to like what happened if the entire world laughed at the same time, all to one thing. Like
that's a lot of pressure as a comedian.
Cosmic positivity juju going on. So
that's cool. So what would be? So second part of the question is what would be your call to action? So in the last part of your speech or your music or your comedy, you've got the opportunity to say, "Hey, y'all, I really want you to consider this, think about this, do this." What would be that thing that you'd say that would make a difference for all of us in the world?
Something to the effect of, you know, if you've been wrong, don't seek revenge. You know, like, because that just kind of propagates. I don't even know propagates is the
propagates.
Right word.
Yeah.
You know, like eye for an eye and the whole world goes blind. Like I'm definitely not an expert on like Middle East policy or anything like that. But my understanding is that these two groups are fighting over the same place, and then there's violence, and then there's violence because there was violence, and like if we could just kind of somehow stop that cycle, then we could start fresh.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I heard a story a while ago that that Israel and Palestine, there was a program where they're having their kids play together, and which I think is like that. Gave
I love that.
Chills, right? Because then you're creating a bond between these two groups that historically are really very aggressive and violent.
Yeah, I love that. That's super cool.
Yeah.
I love that. Awesome, man. All right, we are going to take a very brief commercial break, and we'll be right back, Nick.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
All right, Nick, we are back. So I'm excited to hear about your journey to what led us to here in early 21. So you'd mentioned, just to recap for myself and for the audience, and I'm forgetful, so you correct me. What we know about you so far is we know your name. We know you're currently in California. We know you're the CRO, which I think you might need to explain because not everybody works in SaaS sales or SaaS who listens to the podcast. For a really awesome company named Willow. We know that you're a surfer and you play music. So Nick, what would you like to share about your life, about your philosophy, anything that you want to share with the audience at this point? The floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. So, I mean, I think it's always helpful to if you're trying to get an understanding of something like a concept or a human being, to like understand context, like where did they come from? So like I mentioned, I grew up in Silicon Valley. My dad worked at Lockheed for 30 years. My mom was at Apple for 30 years. So like entrepreneurs and technology have always been in my bones. And my brother and I grew up on the computer, lived a couple pretty neat places, lived in Boston for a while, lived in Louisiana for a while.
I didn't know that.
Louisiana Purchase, the greatest purchase of all time.
Well, let me, what were you doing in Louisiana?
Hurricane Katrina cleanup for 6 months, which was eye-opening, and I dropped out of college for a year and a half to do that.
Were you in AmeriCorps? Was that AmeriCorps or something?
No, it's just a friend who lived down there, and yeah.
Wow, that sounds intense.
Yeah.
So what did you actually have to?
We had it.
Like, what were you cleaning up?
A lot of debris, a lot of garbage, and some of it was safe, some of it was not safe.
Oh, like hazardous material.
Well, I mean, we didn't mess with any of that, but it was just a lot of the area was just like completely devastated. Obviously,
yeah.
So, yeah, eye-opening.
I can imagine.
Brings back a bunch of emotions just thinking about that. Actually,
I'll bet.
So, so serial entrepreneur. A lot of failures so far. This is startup number 6. I've had 2 wins so far, including we just raced around with Google about 8 months ago. So that kind of had a neat halo effect on some of our growth.
Hey, Nick, I want to ask you something that you just said.
Sure.
You said failures. How do you define a failure?
Well, we can tell the tree by the fruit it bears, and so like those ventures didn't bear anything, or at least we raised some investor money and then we ran out of money, didn't make the right business decisions, maybe didn't hire the right people because team is crucial. In fact, I just wrote a piece called "Build a Roaring Fire" on my LinkedIn. It's like a 4-minute read. Talks about how to. Well, it's a fresh look at creating culture. So, and then they're always public as well. Like all of your friends, all of your family, they know you're doing a new venture, and then when that falls flat, it's very. There's no hiding from that.
Yeah, but
like ego, I guess.
But isn't not everybody does startup stuff. Like I've worked in a few startups. I coach a lot of startups. Like statistically, it's statistically improbable that you're going to exit with anything of significance. Yeah, like the stats are against you big time.
Yeah, I know, but you always think like, oh well,
this is the one. Yeah. Well, because it is, right? For like, it might be statistically improbable, but that doesn't mean that there's not hundreds, if not thousands, of companies who do it every year.
Sure.
So why not? Why not you? Why not now? Yeah. Right.
Like the people who think they're crazy enough to change the world are the ones that do.
That's right. So what? Without going into the details of the names, I'm curious what kind of industries or what kind of products did you serve? Like I want to definitely spend some time on Willow because I think it's a super cool platform the audience is going to be interested in. But what like what other kind of products have you worked on before? Like I don't need names, more like what what was the use case or what kind of industries did you serve?
Sure. So I studied marketing and economics at San Jose State. Best 7 years of my life. I love that. Then getting out of school, I jumped into telecom. it's like Vonage, but for business, a company called 8x8.
Mm-hmm.
And from there kind of grew into the security and the security and application space. So I think that was a good foundation for technology.
Yeah. What so tell us, because there's people that are going to be listening to this, lots of people. How did you end up at where you are now, like in your role and, as co-founder and CRO? Like, talk a little bit about that. I'd love to hear your journey to where we are today in terms of what you're up to and what the company you're with is up to.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think anybody has ever achieved anything on their own. So it's always by virtue of other people that you're working with. So when I had started a company called One Piece Work, which is, we started with Vicky Lee and Dafu Gao, two awesome friends of mine from China. We were bringing this co-working accelerator model that we started in San Jose. So just like a house, with like a couple startups. And in 2.5 years, we scaled it to 12 locations with over 600 companies across those locations, mostly in the Bay Area. And so we got to work with Up Honest Capital and help people get funded and built this amazing community. And then I had met Ludwig Dumont, our CEO, and he had noticed this community that we had built. And so that was a perfect way to kind of tap into that for Willow, which is essentially small business social media. So like catching fish with LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. That's kind of like what that is. So I hope that answers your question.
I feel like you're not giving us as much information as I'm looking for. So maybe I should be more specific.
Then dig deeper.
I know you're making me work for it today, my friend. So talk to us about your role at the company. You said CRO, like what does that mean? Because not everybody's going to know what that acronym means. So what does that mean for you? Like, what do you do? What does your team do? What are you responsible for?
Sure. CRO means Chief Revenue Officer. So the next level of a VP of sales. So anything that touches revenue, be it marketing, be it churn mitigation. Churn is like when you lose a customer, right? Because that subscription model is like pretty popular with a lot of businesses these days. So anything that touches that, I'm pretty involved in. But I also like to be pretty connected to the customer experience, because then we get to take that knowledge and then develop that on our roadmap. So be like, hey, it'd be so cool if we could click this box and then 20, 50, 100 people in this database could get an SMS text or an email when I have an important piece of content I want to send out. And that kind of can get that early interaction and engagement, which leads to more visibility. So,
yeah. And who, a little bit more about social media and what Willow specifically does. So, full disclosure, I'm a user of, I'm a user of Willow, and maybe it would make sense for me to actually share how you and I met a year and a half ago. Yeah, so Nick and I met at, there's this really great conference called Ascent, and it's for startup people, startup companies, where they can go and they can set up a booth or just a stand. And it's really for venture capitalists to walk around and talk to all these companies. That's really what it's for. I mean, there's people that are walking around looking at products, but really it's for people that want to raise funding. And I remember, I think it was the end of the second day, and you just walked up to us and introduced yourself. And I don't know if you're just like looking to generate business or you're just a friendly guy. I don't remember, but we struck up a good conversation. We connected, and then I ended up learning about what Willow was doing and said, hey, this feels like it would be good for my business. So I became a customer. I've been a happy customer ever since. And so, Nick, for those listening who are interested in Willow specifically, without getting too salesy here, I'm not trying to, pimp out the product, although I would be happy to. And then we can talk about what a sponsorship for this show costs afterwards, Nick, because I guess we haven't really quite negotiated that part yet. But nice. That's to come. We'll do that on the air for the audience.
Shooting from the hip, I dig
it. Yeah. Like, hey, what do you think about this? So what are the ideal people to use Willow? Like, who do you like to talk to, and do you have any success stories?
I guess I could answer by saying who it's not a good fit for. Because ironically,
okay, sure.
we started off by thinking restaurants were going to be a good fit because we had a connection to Uber Eats in San Francisco. The reason it turned out not to be that great a fit is because, by and large, restaurants don't have an expertise in something that they need to communicate.
Right.
The same way a realtor or an accountant or an attorney or coach, your social credibility, or you could say like your digital footprint, is important because that's your virtual. We're on the internet 40% more, according to the Nielsen ratings. So nobody wants to eat at an empty restaurant. So having a lot of activity, having a lot of engagement, being useful, being funny on your channels, that process can cost you like $10,000+ going through an agency, or it could take you hours a day. We have this pretty interesting hybrid approach of software plus a human being for $200 a month. And that hits a sweet spot for a lot of small businesses who can take the 30 minutes a week to approve and personalize the content. And so that we've got like this kind of heartbeat on your channels. And just kind of holding the business owner's hand, depending on how much help they need, if they're starting from scratch or they already have a pretty good cadence.
Very cool. Very cool. What is, without, spoiling the product secrets, what do you see as next for the company?
Ooh, well, so far we've been able to, we've got a few hundred customers and we're almost 3 years old. We've learned a lot along the way, but the next development for us will be in a couple months. We'll be releasing Willow Lite. So no human interaction, so just the software for $99 a month. I think this is going to be a game changer for us, because there's a lot of folks that have an idea of what they want to do, and like they can chat or connect with us digitally, right? But still want to grow their presence online to drive new customers. And you can track all of it through Google Analytics. So this is pretty helpful stuff.
I love that. And I love that from a cost model, you get to have your highly paid customer success managers go and work with the people who need that extra step. And then although they're not paying you maybe the 200, it's more of a self-service thing. So you don't have the human capital cost behind it. You just have the technology cost.
Yeah. So margins are better.
Yeah.
The product is pretty badass. I mean, 3 years ago when we started, it was very manual. It just wasn't nearly as pretty or intuitive or feature rich as it is today. So I'm really, really proud of what the team has accomplished in the past couple of years.
Yeah, cool. So for those listening, and again, this is not just a sales pitch for Willow, but this is where Nick works. So we're going to spend a few minutes on it. It's willow.co. And you can, if you Google search like Willow social media, you'll find it's the first thing. I think, Nick, your smiling face might be on the page somewhere, if I'm not mistaken.
Cool.
Maybe.
Lucky me.
Lucky
it's willow.co.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, also, it's actually a company that's based in Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's cool.
Born in San Francisco. We're truly a remote team. So speaking of which, what's your experience with remote work, Jason? Has it been a pretty easy transition for you, or?
Well, this is a funny question. Is it, by the way, are we moving into the next section of the show, or is this something related to what we're talking about now?
Either one. I'm just kind of curious because I guess a little bit behind the question is like, we've always pretty much been remote. Like we had an office in Belgium, but the transition for us was pretty normal. I'm just kind of curious about yourself being a talented and in-demand coach.
Yeah, I've always been remote. So I've been remote for trying to think about my career. So as in my coaching and consulting business that I run now, I've always been remote. That doesn't mean I won't do on-site things, but people don't want to meet in person because it's just not that scalable. So I've been doing video like Zoom calls since, the day I started this business, which would have been in like February of 19.
Wow. Okay.
Prior to that, I worked at a a startup based on Market Street in San Francisco. I was remote. I was the only employee on the East Coast for a good portion of that. So I was remote, except for going on customer visits. But even that, I was still remote. Like I didn't have an office in New York. I would go to San Francisco once a month, and that was super cool. We had a decent space at a WeWork right there on Market Street, but right down the street from the Salesforce Tower. But I was still remote. Prior to that, I actually did work at a company where we were in the office. We had an amazing office on Broadway and Houston in the city. And that was really an in-person company for the most part. That was just the culture. But prior to that, I always worked remotely. So almost every job I've ever had, I was remote, except for maybe the first two positions I had out of college were in an office. I was in sales, but we'd go in the office every day unless we're on sales calls. That was quite a while ago now, but I've always been remote. So for me, nothing's really changed.
Got it.
Long-winded answer to say nothing. Long-winded answer. I could have said nothing's changed for me.
You're a pretty adaptable guy anyways.
Yeah. I stare at Zoom all day. So nothing there. So let's actually transition, because you actually proactively went into the next section, and this is the Ask Jason Anything section. Okay. And I'm a little scared what you might ask me, but I think
nothing scares Jason Frizzell.
Nothing scares me except for Nick asking me something on this podcast, on my own podcast. So I guess let's just see what you got for me, Nick. So what did you want to ask me that I can answer for you and for the audience?
Okay. This question is actually in relation to what you and I had talked about. I don't know if you remember this, like a year and a half ago, when we were having lunch in New York.
Yeah.
And I think it was Bryant Park.
Yes. Maybe? I remember. Yeah. That was awesome.
Yeah. Gorgeous day. Oh my God.
That was super cool.
You had told me a little bit about improv and how it impacted your conversations and dynamics. So I guess finish this sentence. Improv has given me blank, and now I don't have to blank.
Oh. Improv has given me the ability to say yes. And now I don't have to only see the world in black or white.
Wow. That's awesome. This is like Mad Libs.
Yeah, I like it. No, it's fun. This is not pre-planned, by the way. I had no idea what Nick was going to ask it. Yeah, I love that. I mean,
I wouldn't have tossed it your way if I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, the stereotype of improv is like yes and, because in improv you always yes and, you never say no to your partner or your scene partners. Excuse me, because if you do, that just kills a scene. I mean, we've all seen good improv, and most of it, we probably all seen good improv and bad improv. Bad improv is when Nick and I are in a scene and Nick's like, "Hey, it's really good to see you here at the market." And I'm like, "We're not at a market. We're at the car dealership." And then the audience is just like, "Why are you fighting already? Like, there's enough angst in the world. Like, let's see something interesting." And then, so the ability for me to relate this even more. And can I actually expand upon this a little bit? Because I love this question. I love talking about it.
Yes, and you may.
Yeah, yes, and please do. So I think for most of my life, and still working on this today, I've always seen the world in pretty binary. So you might look at it as a black or white. I think coming from a sales background, and I don't know how you see this as a chief revenue officer, but seeing the world as a win or a loss, because in sales, you either win a deal or you lose a deal. Like there's not really anything in between. Like they either say yes and they give you money and you serve them or sell them a product, or they say no or no, not right now. And then you don't get the revenue, and then it's counted as a loss, right? Like if you're in sales, you actually count that as a loss if they say not right now.
Sure.
So I've been working on breaking that apart and thinking about, so for example, like let's say I talk to somebody who says, "Hey, I might want to work with you," and I'm interviewing 3 coaches and they don't hire me, which happens. It happens to everybody, of course. Like, is that really a loss, or what can I learn from that? Yes. And okay, so this client didn't hire me. That actually leaves an extra hour in my week or extra bandwidth that I have to go and find my next client who's an even better fit for me, who I'm going to have even more fun with, versus like, screw this. Like they didn't hire me. Like that's a loss.
Yeah. Then it kind of goes down the path of like finger pointing or like, thinking there's something wrong with you. And
that's right.
That's like a negative spiral that doesn't do anything to push you forward, which is where you want to go.
Yeah. It doesn't do you any good. And coming from a world of selling products, technology, I worked, I don't know if you knew this about me. I worked in telecom too. I worked in big telecom. So, excuse me, out of college, I worked for Nextel, which became Sprint. So I worked at big telecom, and then I worked at the mothership telecom. I worked at AT&T for almost 3 years.
Yeah.
I worked on the wireless side. So, I came from like pretty big organization, massive resources, massive organization, unbelievable amount of resources, but also completely bureaucratic. And then I went to some startups, but I always had marketing and resources behind me. And then when I shifted out and did my own thing, like it's just me out here. Like, yes, I have like a virtual assistant support and I have people that support me a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's just me and my own business. So learning the resilience of not taking things personally and like just seeing like, hey, what's the thing I can take from this? What's the thing I can do to get better next time? Probably like surfing, or it's actually like any athletic thing, right? Like, hey, what did I learn from this experience? Hey, next time I go hit this wave, how do I want to approach it differently? So I really look at my business that way. And when I'm coaching people, I like, hey, what did you learn from this? Instead of like, wow, it sounds like you're upset. Sure. And upset is fine. But like, hey, Nick, what did you learn from this? Or what are you taking away from this that you can take in the future? So that's the main, yeah. So for me, improv, and also it's kind of what you asked me at the beginning around public, or like the thing that's inside my comfort zone. I just like, I've always been decent at it, but I can just go and have a conversation and just move it forward most all the time. Yeah. Because if you just say yes and to people and you're genuinely interested, you've done 99% of the work.
Yeah. And especially when, if you're genuinely curious in, assuming you like the person or you can begin to trust them, then it becomes less about making the sale and then more about building a long-term relationship.
That's right.
So probably about 5, 6 years ago, I started my own CRM, which is really just like a Word document, but it's segmented by space. So in fact, you're on there under coaches.
Love it.
And if I need somebody else that does like ed tech investments, or maybe they're in medical technology sales or whatever the case is, rather than keeping it in your brain, you can just do Command F, like a find search, or search rather, and then be able to make appropriate introductions, even when it has nothing to do with your bottom line.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what that mentality of abundance is how I've been laying the groundwork for my career. And it takes longer, but it's not transactional. And people know that I know other good people, and I like to be of service. I like to be helpful.
That's right.
So yeah,
that's awesome, man. I think we have time for maybe one more question for me, if you've got one, or we can move on to more about the Nick Larson, which is why everybody's actually here. So I'll leave it to you. What do you want to ask me something else? Or you want me to pound you with some more questions and leave some time for the roasting?
Right. Well, I'm curious. What would you say? What's an album that was part of the soundtrack of your childhood?
This is a funny question. Oh man, I'm going to out myself. So
ABBA. It's ABBA.
No. I'm going to out myself. So my background, Nick, you screwed me on this one.
I done did it.
You done did it. This is funny. I think you're going to not find this that surprising, but it's not embarrassing. But so I grew up in the suburbs of Minnesota, suburb of St. Paul. And I grew up with a bunch of people who looked just like me. Like I graduated a large high school class of 550 people. And I think we had 549 white people. Right. So not a diverse set of people. And high school, my genre of choice was gangster rap.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So for example, like Dr. Dre, The Chronic came out in 93.
Yeah.
Still one of the greatest rap albums of all time. I was a big House of Pain fan. Naughty by Nature. I think Snoop Dogg Doggy Style came out, I want to say, when I was either, was it 95 or maybe 96? Onyx, Rex and Effects, like all these, and some of those weren't like so much gangster rap, but Ice-T, NWA, like I really like that stuff. And I still like it now. which is kind of interesting because it's so not the world I came from at all, which I think might be part of the reason that I really liked it and still really like it. So yeah, that's when I think of my childhood, the first thing that comes to mind for me is bumping gangster rap in my 1993 turquoise Geo Prism that
Yes.
literally, I don't know how that thing ran. I bought it for my parents. It was not a nice car, but in high school, it was great. I remember just driving around with my friends in high school and just listening to this stuff.
And feeling top of the world.
Top of the world, man. Like I don't know about you. There's days when I'm like, man, if all you in high school only knew how great you had it. High school was awesome. I had a lot of friends. We had I'd had some jobs, so I made a little bit of money, played sports. Like high school is awesome.
Yeah. Nothing was ever going to change.
No, it's so good. And then you're like, oh wait, now I have responsibility, and now I go to college, and I have this coursework that's actually hard.
Yeah.
And now I have to go get a job and make money and all these things. So yeah, that's a good question. So for me, it was gangster rap.
Interesting.
Much to my parents' chagrin.
That was an inspiration for your entrepreneurial endeavors for later.
Yes.
Seriously.
Well, yes. No, I do. I don't know about that.
The reason I ask is Ben Horowitz, who's like of A16Z, which is like the Ferrari of venture capital.
Sure.
He's also a big fan of hip hop. So he's buddies with like Nas and Kanye and DMX. And he wrote a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Yeah.
And he talks about how rap culture has been fiercely creative and entrepreneurial from the start. Like think about selling like mixtapes out of the back of your car. Like for example, as he was asked in an interview a while ago, Ben Horowitz, which hip hop artist would he be most likely to invest in, or which is most like a startup founder he'd invest in? Like without even hesitating, he said Chance the Rapper.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So he said, this guy didn't sign to any labels. He did it himself. Like Chance the Rapper is the CEO of Chance the Rapper. Like He doesn't work for anybody. He does his own merchandise, his albums,
crush it.
Probably some of the artwork, all the contracts. So
I love that. I think if I got to answer that question 20 years ago, I would probably say Jay-Z, since I would probably get a nice return on my investment, or Dr. Dre.
Right.
Very nice return on my investment.
Yeah. He's not a businessman. He's a business.
He's not a businessman. He's a businessman. One of the greatest lyrics. Thank you. That was a cool question. I've obviously never had that question before. I've never really thought about it. Can I out myself with one more thing?
Please.
I was also a big Boyz II Men fan. I'm not going to lie. So I listened to a lot of Boyz II Men. Yeah.
That also doesn't surprise me, but I dig it.
All right. Enough about me and my embarrassing music tastes. Good thing I moved on past that, and all my music tastes are very sophisticated now.
Exactly. Vivaldi and whatnot.
Evolving, always evolving. So Nick, what are you passionate about?
Passionate about the ocean. I mean, spent a lot of time in that.
The Led Zeppelin song or the ocean?
Oh, wow. This is a little embarrassing. I didn't realize it was a Zeppelin song named The Ocean.
Oh my God. We may have to stop this recording right now.
Can you sing it for us, Jason?
Oh, hell no. I can't believe you've never heard The Ocean. That is one of those. You know it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We'll probably have to
we're gonna edit that part out.
Well, no, I think at the end of this episode, I'm gonna play you like 10 seconds. You'll be like, oh, of course.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Yeah, I'm also pretty passionate about like comedy and how people interact, like the science of persuasion, why we make decisions. Yeah. Titillating conversation like this one.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Awesome. What's the thing that you are most proud of in your life, Nick?
Well, I don't have an awesome family like yours, but someday I will.
You will.
Kids and whatnot. So from a personal perspective, I'm really proud of the work that we've done with Hack Cancer San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
I've been on the leadership committee since 2016. We've raised a lot of money for cancer research and had a really good time throwing events and while we do it. Professionally, starting 2 companies and scaling them to $1 million of annual recurring revenue. Well, almost. We're just on the cusp for Willow.
Yeah, that's no small feat for those who haven't worked in startup. That is not a small undertaking.
Yeah. Well, it's getting the right people involved and staying coachable, working with people that are experts in human dynamics like yourself, and constantly wanting to improve.
Very nice. What's something you're afraid might actually be true about you?
Something I'm afraid that might actually be true about me?
It might actually be true about you. Yep.
That I'm not smart enough to master another language. I don't think we mentioned it yet, but I'm moving to Colombia for a year in a couple of days. I'll be leaving on Friday.
Yeah. Any particular reason, or?
Oh, I love this woman.
Yes. There it is. I like how Nick's waited almost an hour to finally get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
Do you want to give her a shout out right now?
Sorry?
You want to give her a quick shout out? I'm assuming she's going to listen. You don't have to say her name, but she knows who she is.
Yeah. So Sandra has an amazing hat company called Sombreros, SANDBREROS.com, Sombreros. And her company is exploding right now. I'm so proud of her. But yeah, I mean, with language, it's when you're in the zone with language and you're really vibing and conversing, communicating, it brings the connection to another level, and it feels really cool too, because it's not your mother tongue.
Yeah.
I understand Spanish well enough, probably like a third grade or fourth grade level, but when Sandra and her friends talk really fast, I feel like a total idiot. And I know that that's just like my ego, right? Like that's my, maybe not ego, I don't know, you know better than I, but it's like self-doubt that I'm not going to be able to accomplish this thing. But I know that for what I might lack in like a natural affinity for language, which I don't think is even that strong. Like I have a pretty good grasp right now. I can outwork that, and I can make sure that I hit that by putting in the time and the effort. So that's one thing that I think might be one thing for me to overcome.
Yeah. So the second part of this question, which I don't give my guests because I put you on the spot with it, but I think it's always fascinating. And I think you've kind of answered this. What is the thing you do to compensate for the thing that you're afraid might actually be true about you? So how do you compensate for that around the other side? Because, you're a psychology guy, a mindset guy. Like, we're always going to compensate for the thing that we believe that we're afraid of. So what's the thing that you compensate? How do you compensate for that?
Do you, when you say compensate, do you mean like, what do I do to overcome that, or how do I overcompensate from a place of ego? Right.
Well, either, right. So I'll give you an example from my life. I have and by the way, I've talked about this in the show before. When we talk about the thing you're afraid might actually be true about you, this is kind of a coaching question. It doesn't mean that it's true. It means that your psyche or your ego believes that it's true. So it doesn't actually mean it. It's just like, it's the story you tell yourself. Sure, so for me, I have this story that I'm lazy. I know I'm not actually lazy. Like, if you looked at my calendar, it's pretty obvious I'm not lazy. But the story in my head is like, hey, am I actually just kind of lazy? So what I do to compensate is what I just said. I fill up my calendar. I'm doing a lot of stuff. I'm, like the thing that, and is it compensating? Maybe not, but it's the thing that I'm reliable to go and do to prove to myself and to everybody else out there, whether they know it or not, that the thing that I believe that's true about me is actually false. And let me prove it to you.
Interesting.
And most all of us, if you think about it, think about everybody you know in your life, people that you know well, and you know that, and you maybe have an answer for the thing that you're afraid might be true about them. You can almost predict exactly what the thing they do to compensate for it on the other side is. It's a natural human thing.
That's crazy for me to hear you say that, because you're constantly creating community. We did the small groups thing a while ago with some wonderful people, including Kevin. So shout out to Kevin. He's launching his documentary. I don't know.
And I just to shout out Kevin, just recorded a podcast with him a couple weeks ago. So he will also be in the next 8 weeks or so. So you two will be both up.
Oh, wow. Big shoes. Yeah, he's a marvelous human being.
He is. Yeah. So for you as, if you were my client, I might have you and you're to say, hey, what do you think? I'm struggling with an employee. Not that you would struggle with employees. Your team is phenomenal. But if you've ever struggled with an employee, this is actually an interesting context to look at them and say, like, what's the thing they overcompensate for? Like, is it, and let me give you a few examples from my career, not necessarily me, but as a manager, you've probably seen these employees that are like over communicative with you. Like they're always asking permission to do everything. You probably seen that. So like, what are they compensating for? Probably that they don't feel like they're going to meet expectations or they're good enough.
Like
Employees,
a command of the technology.
Right.
Anything.
Yep. Employees who don't communicate enough. So the opposite. So like off doing their own thing. And like as a manager or as the CRO, you're like, well, I don't know what you're doing. How do they do that? People that operate really quickly, like make decisions really fast and go out and do this. And I was super guilty of this earlier in my career, and I'm still working on it now. I remember early in my career, I was like the typical salesperson who was like, oh my God, the customer is 1% upset. We need to like fix it all right now, which is, that is a recipe for a disaster in a business because you can't be that reactive. Right. But for me, what I was compensating for is like, I want them to like me. I want to be likable. So the way I'm likable is to like be likable is to like go and fix their stuff right away. So that's how I would try and compensate for it.
Yeah, I've done that too.
Yeah, I think most salespeople at some point, especially when you're a little more junior, like that's kind of the natural thing because you believe that's actually what's going to sell and make you more money. But most customers that are a little bit sophisticated, like the kind of people that you serve and Willow or the kind of customers I sold, like they understand that things happen. It's more about the long-term, the longevity of things working. Like, hey, there's going to be software bugs. There's going to be, customer service issues. Like you're going to talk to somebody. So that's another example. And I'm curious as we're talking about this, Nick, is there anything from your career, either for yourself or people that you've worked with in the past that you see where you're like, oh, I can see where they were compensating and then maybe what the thing they were actually afraid of was?
So before we go down that path, I heard something not too long ago that I thought was interesting. If somebody goes to a hotel and has essentially 10 out of 10 experience, they'll rate that on average 8 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
But if something goes wrong and then management at the hotel has an opportunity to fix it, that's where they get those extra 2 points.
I've heard that too.
Yeah. So
fascinating.
It's like, it's not necessarily how we perform initially. I mean, obviously that's crucial, right? Because that's part of our integrity and how we say we're going to deliver. But when things get screwed up, how do you fix it? Are you available? Do you pull in the right people? Do you make excuses? Are you not being 100% transparent? Which is transparency is one of the main cores or tenets of our company.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. In relation to your other question about where somebody has been overcompensating and they do certain things that I guess highlight that, was that kind of your question?
Yeah, and I know you do a lot of networking, and so do I. I see this all the time in networking, all the time. You're like, that person's so overcompensating.
Yeah, it's not necessarily just when somebody's junior.
No.
I was talking to somebody about maybe 4 or 5 days ago that had mentioned to me several times that they're worth over $1 billion. And I believe them because I know mutual folks and I know that they've achieved a lot of success in their specific space.
Yeah. Why would you need to tell somebody that if you're worth $1 billion?
Yeah. I mean, that has to come from somewhere.
Lack of happiness, maybe.
It's a place of, maybe not please like me, but, I can provide this value.
Yeah.
Look what I've done. Look at me. So, that's
interesting.
Kind of like a conversation.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Well, Nick, we're going to start to wrap up here because we both have to go at the top of the hour, but I want to ask you a couple more questions. And actually, this is not so much of I'll ask you this as a question. So what's your general philosophy on life, Nick?
I'll just be kind. Like, you never know what other people are going through. and then take risks as well. And then that's just probably who I am. Cause I have like an amazing mom and dad that gave me this foundation of a comfortable upbringing so I could take those risks. But you never want to be at the end of your life. You're like, well, damn, what if I did this? What if I did that? So, you know, being content, but also being ambitious. I think that's kind of like the sweet spice or the sweet spot. Rather.
No, that so resonates for me. And I had a client ask me last week, she's working on this really, really cool brand that I can't wait to talk about on the show here sooner than later and have her back on and talk about it. It's really cool. It's an inspirational brand. It's not a technology. It's like a paper-based product, but it's going to be amazing. Nice. And she said to me, she goes, when is it going to be enough for me? Like, when is enough going to be enough? And you run into this all the time. And it's not about the money. It's about like, when am I going to have enough ideas to go and start this product? Or when is my marketing going to be ready to go out? And so many people never do the thing because it's never enough.
Analysis by paralysis. And right. Like this as an entrepreneur. And I think this is something that you probably don't struggle from as much. I don't really struggle from this either, because you said like risk taking, it's never going to be enough. Like our psyche wants us to, like the safe thing from a psychological perspective is, hey, what's the answer? How's it going to work? And how's it going to turn out? Yeah.
And most of the things that we do in life, we can't ever answer how it's actually going to turn out, because there's no way to know that. How is it going to go? We can plan till the cows come home, but things are going to change. And what do I need to know? And you said this through Willow, like you're 3 years into it, you've learned a lot. There's things you literally just don't know that you don't know when you start processes or start things. And this includes things in business, things in relationships, things as a parent, speaking as a parent, like you just don't know. And I think that's a great philosophy, which is why you're uniquely well suited to do the things you do, because you're probably not afraid to go out there and just get after it and try it and not be afraid to get out there and do it. Trusting that it's all going to work well, and also trusting yourself that if it doesn't work out exactly how it is, you're going to be resilient and get back up. And
I appreciate those kind words.
Yeah. And well, I was coming with a surfing analogy, and I'm not going to do it now because it's too cheesy.
Okay. I do love the cheesy. That's okay. We'll save that one for later.
We'll save that one for next time.
Okay.
Nice. Is there anything else that you want to share with the audience at this point, Nick, before we wrap up?
Find mentors. Just find mentors and be coachable. And yeah, at least for me, organization is a big piece. Adding structure. And in fact, if you're an entrepreneur that is looking to scale your company or grow yourself and be more efficient, like definitely reach out to Jason. Jason's been helping me for some time introduce structure into my workflow and accountability, because it's so easy to get distracted, like, notifications on your phone or whatever. So just having that laser focus of uninterrupted time. I think that is something, if you're struggling with that, definitely reach out to Jason. He's a rock star when it comes to that.
Oh, thank you so much, Nick. That was also completely unscripted, and now I'm blushing over here. I want to ask you something. How would you define coachable for people that don't know what that means? Because and I don't ask this from a coaching perspective. I ask this as somebody who manages people. Like that's a management term as well, and a leadership term. What does that mean to you?
I know we've talked a lot about ego, but we all want to be perceived as like smart and capable and funny and connected. Like that's pretty consistent. But having the ability or willingness to set all of that aside to actually improve, and then also engaging with people that can see your blind spots. Like you and I have had tons of conversations where you asked me questions and we walked down the path that I didn't even realize I was struggling with that stuff because I'm in my own head. Yep. Right. So being coachables, being willing to let other people that are smarter than you or better at a particular thing than you get you where you want to be, even if it means, you might look less than stellar in the process. But, innovation is really messy up front. Growth is messy, right?
Yeah. Can I offer you one additional point on that?
For sure.
I would argue, not with you, but I would argue that they don't necessarily need to be smarter than you or have an expertise different than you. What I mean by that is,
I'm willing
the fact
to
that they're not you.
I'm being coachable right now.
Yeah. Well, no, and that doesn't, right. And that doesn't mean, and that's where mentorship really comes in. But what I mean by that, Nick, is because they're not you, they don't have your same blind spots. And it's funny you bring this up, but I do want to kind of close out with this today. One of the things in coaching that's super interesting is people think you need to hire a coach who's an expert in what you do. And there's a ton of value in that. A lot of people that hire me, like, hey, I worked in startups, I know sales, and I know marketing, and we do some stuff there. But some other coaches I know, they really look for clients they know nothing about. They know nothing about what they do, because all they can do is show up as curious, which can actually, and I think you mentioned this earlier about curiosity, that can open up the world for people. Because if I just ask you questions without actually understanding anything about it, and there's a funny thing where it's like, show up like a 5-year-old, like ask questions like a 5-year-old, like, well, what does that mean? And so when somebody uses a word, like you and I are going to have a conversation about SaaS, you're going to say a bunch of stuff and I'm going to go, oh, I know what that means. But what if I actually didn't? What if I didn't know exactly what that meant? And so that's in coaching, a practice that you can take a look at, of like pretending that you don't actually know. Because when you know that you know, that's the ego that you're talking about.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
It's an interesting parallel, Jason. Back when we were, doing like the in-person pitch events and whatever, one of the most consistent critiques of a pitch that I would see from judges is to take it down a notch from an expertise perspective.
That's right. People buy on vision, not on the knowing every last detail, because there's a million, like, totally.
Yeah. And if you can communicate something simply, then chances are you understand it. And then people are going to be confident that you can explain it to other folks.
That's right.
In a simple, approachable way.
Yeah. I love that for pitches too. I love watching pitches, and you see this on Shark Tank. It's like, know your fundamentals, but you don't need to know the details to invest. You don't need to know all the details. The due diligence is going to happen. What people get excited about is the vision up front. Like, how is this going to make a difference in people's lives? Like, I don't need to know how Willow operates in the back end. I just need to know how it provides value to me on the front end. And so like when we met, I never said, hey, so tell me exactly how this works. I'm like, oh, like, this is the thing that I trust you, that you're telling me how it works. And that's good enough for me. So I think there's something there. And I say all this not from a high horse, because I was somebody in my career as sales engineering, I had to be the guy who knew it all. And I knew a lot about products. I worked at a company for almost 5 years. I knew a lot about how our stuff worked. And I leaned on that so hard. And I realized now, like, it wasn't that valuable. It just wasn't.
Plus it's really liberating to say, I don't know, because then it's
so good. Especially when your wife asks you something. I don't know. I can't be involved in that.
That might be an outlier where you should have the answer. I don't. well, I don't know.
when you're back on in 2 years and you're happily married, we'll talk about that. We'll see. You'll say Jason gave me terrible marriage advice. You'll be like, I thought it was going to work out, but then I just started saying it at no things, and she got really pissed at me.
I see how talented your wife is and how happy you are together. So that's probably not the case. But
thank you, Nick. All right, so let's wrap her up for today, and caveat this for everybody listening. This is all going to be in the show notes. So Nick, where can the audience find you, knowing that we'll hear you say it, and then also you can connect through the show notes and on my website, which I'll put the link in there as well. So Nick, how can the audience connect with you and find you? And by the way, I'm going to give you a proactive shout out. Connect with Nick on LinkedIn. He's a LinkedIn maniac. Like, your post gets so many reactions, and your writing is so good. I wish I had that skill. I do not. So I want to give you that shout out a ton, and you offer a ton of value. So really, Nick, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. So on LinkedIn, I'm just under Nick Larson, NickLarson. Would love to chat and connect. I do like to be a bridge between good people. And also on Instagram, if I could brag, I have some pretty cool pictures.
He does. It's true.
Captain Kangaroo. So CPTN.kangaroo on Instagram.
So Nick Larson, CRO, Willow, and Captain Kangaroo on Instagram. So there you go. The perfect balance of personal and professional. I like it.
Right. Ambitious beach bum, all that good stuff.
Yeah. And yes. And you know, if you heard earlier, very soon we're going to get to see pictures of you in Colombia, which for me in upstate New York, surrounded by 3 feet of snow right now, that I cannot wait to see your pictures, because I haven't seen anything tropical or anything warm in feels like forever.
Well, you know, we've got an extra bedroom. If you can swing that.
Don't tempt me. I'll have my wife come on and we'll talk about that live on the podcast and see how that goes. But honey, I'm going to leave you with an infant and a 5-year-old. I'm going surfing in Colombia.
What's the worst that could happen?
All right, Nick. Well, thank you so much for being on. I want to leave us with some Nick Larson patented words of wisdom. And the words of wisdom can be from you. They can be from Huckleberry Finn. Doesn't really matter. What do you want to leave us with? And let's have it fit on a Post-it note.
Cool. Be consistently good. Your network and your reputation are everything.
Yeah. You know me, I'm a huge believer in that. Well, Nick, thank you so much for being on. Safe travels this Friday. And thank you for your friendship, your partnership. Best of luck to you, Ludwig, the rest of the team at Willow, and all the things you're doing and all the things you're going to create. And we will connect again soon.
Love it. Thanks so
Nick.
much, Jason.
Yep. Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.